When my tractor crashed through the weathered soil of my Montana cattle ranch, I never expected that within hours my property would be swarming with specialized military personnel, or that my accidental discovery would unearth a Cold War-era research facility containing experimental technology so advanced that even my 15 years as a former Air Force structural engineer couldn't help me comprehend the global security implications it would trigger. The late September sun cast long shadows across Whispering Pines Ranch as I guided my John Deere tractor across the eastern pasture. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. At 47, the deep lines etched around my eyes told the story of nearly 2 decades in military service, followed by 8 years battling the unpredictable forces of nature as a rancher in Montana's Bitterroot Valley. Life had hardened me, but nothing had prepared me for what lay hidden beneath the drought-cracked soil of my struggling family ranch. I had been clearing a new drainage channel to redirect spring runoff that had been flooding my lower fields for the past 3 seasons. Climate change had altered the reliable weather patterns my father had depended on, forcing me to continuously adapt or risk losing everything. The 100-year-old family ranch was already operating on razor-thin margins, threatened by both corporate agricultural interests and increasingly extreme weather patterns. Just need to break through this harder section, I muttered to myself, adjusting the hydraulics to lower the excavation attachment. The ranch's weathered buildings stood silhouetted against the setting sun in the distance. The 2-story farmhouse built by my grandfather in 1952, the barn desperately needing a new roof, and the small cabin where my son Doug stayed during semester breaks from engineering school in Bozeman. The tractor lurched suddenly, the sharp sound of metal striking concrete echoing across the quiet field. The impact nearly threw me from my seat, the machine's engine groaning in protest before I could disengage the controls. "What the hell?" I said aloud, though no one was there to hear me. In 15 years of working this land, I'd hit plenty of rocks, even the occasional piece of abandoned farm equipment, but never anything that sounded like this: hollow, reinforced, deliberately constructed. I killed the engine and climbed down, my knees protesting after hours in the tractor cab. The excavation attachment had carved away a section of earth to reveal what appeared to be a concrete structure with exposed rebar. Not some random boulder or abandoned equipment, but something intentionally built and carefully hidden beneath. Nearly 4 feet of Montana soil. As the sun dipped lower, casting the excavation in dramatic shadows, I cleared more soil away by hand, revealing what appeared to be a massive concrete hatch, approximately 8 feet in diameter. Its surface was weathered but remarkably intact, with faded stenciled lettering partially visible beneath decades of soil compression. Restricted access, Project Helix, SCI majestic clearance required. My military background immediately triggered recognition. This wasn't some abandoned septic system or forgotten root cellar. The clearance classifications, though outdated, suggested high-level government involvement, possibly connected to the network of missile silos and command bunkers that dotted Montana during the Cold War. But this location wasn't on any public or declassified record I'd ever encountered during my Air Force career, specializing in military infrastructure. Using the flashlight from my phone, I examined the structure more carefully. Unlike the typical missile silo designs I was familiar with, this installation featured unusual architectural elements and sealing mechanisms that suggested something more specialized than conventional military construction. Most concerning was the presence of what appeared to be modern security monitoring equipment partially exposed by my excavation. Technology far too recent to have been installed during the Cold War era. "This doesn't make sense," I whispered, photographing the discovery from multiple angles. The security components looked like they had been serviced or updated well after the facility had been officially abandoned. and suggesting ongoing maintenance deliberately hidden from public awareness. As darkness settled over the ranch, I made the decision to secure the site until morning, when better light would allow more thorough documentation. I marked the location with reflective survey stakes from my truck and covered the exposed section with a tarp weighted down by rocks. Basic precautions that seemed inadequate for what might be a significant discovery with national security implications. During the mile-long drive back to the main house, my training in military protocols battled with my curiosity. Standard procedure would be immediate reporting to authorities, but years in service had taught me that bureaucratic responses often raised more questions than they answered, particularly with installations that didn't align with official records. In my kitchen, I spread the photos from my phone across the worn oak table my father had built decades earlier. The single-frame photograph on the wall showed me in my Air Force uniform, standing beside 3 other service members in front of a partially constructed airfield in an undisclosed location, the only visible reminder of my extensive career in military infrastructure operations that had taken me to classified installations across 3 continents. Despite the remoteness of my ranch, I had maintained high-speed internet access, a necessity for managing modern agricultural operations, and staying connected with my son at university. Now it served another purpose as I searched government databases for any reference to Project Helix in declassified records. The search yielded troubling results, minimal references in publicly available documents, but enough patterns to suggest deliberate redaction rather than insignificance. Project Helix appeared in fragmented mentions connected to advanced materials research, electromagnetic field applications, and most concerning, several cross-references to experimental propulsion systems with classification levels that had required presidential authorization. As midnight approached, my phone rang, an unusual occurrence at this hour on my isolated ranch. The caller ID showed a restricted number. "Mr. Henderson?" asked a formal voice when I answered. "This is Major Douglas Everett, United States Air Force Special Projects Division. Our monitoring systems have detected unusual search patterns originating from your location regarding classified historical projects. Given your former clearance status, I'm sure you understand the sensitivity of such inquiries." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Montana night. The speed of response confirmed my suspicions that the facility wasn't as abandoned as its buried condition suggested. "I might have found something on my property today that relates to those searches," I replied carefully. "We're aware of the structural exposure," Major Everett said, without elaboration on how they could possibly know about an incident that had occurred just hours earlier on private property, miles from any public road. "A specialized assessment team has been dispatched and will arrive at your location at approximately 0600 hours. Until then, we request that you maintain site security and refrain from further excavation or documentation." The call ended before I could ask how they had detected my discovery so quickly, or why a specialized assessment team had been immediately mobilized for what should have been, according to official records, an abandoned Cold War relic of minimal significance. As I prepared for bed, knowing sleep would likely elude me, I couldn't shake the feeling that my accidental discovery had triggered protocols established long ago for situations exactly like this, when buried secrets, both literal and figurative, were unexpectedly exposed to the light. Dawn broke over Whispering Pines Ranch with the crisp clarity unique to early autumn in Montana's Bitterroot Valley. I had barely slept, alternating between reviewing what little information I could find about Project Helix and staring at the ceiling, processing the implications of what lay buried on my property. I had risen before sunrise, brewing a pot of coffee strong enough to cut through the mental fog of a restless night. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Through the kitchen window, I watched as the first hint of sunlight illuminated the distant mountains, their peaks already dusted with early snow that had fallen the previous week. The ranch had been in my family for 3 generations, passed down from my grandfather, who had purchased the land in 1950 after returning from service in Korea. What troubled me wasn't just the presence of an undocumented government facility on my property, but the timeline. My family had owned this land for over 70 years with no knowledge of what lay beneath it. The coffee maker had just finished its final gurgle when I noticed headlights approaching along my private access road, the first of what would soon become a procession of vehicles, unlike anything seen at Whispering Pines since my father's funeral 8 years earlier. 4 black SUVs with government plates led the convoy, followed by 2 larger vehicles that resembled mobile command centers, their satellite equipment visible even in the pre-dawn light. Behind them came specialized equipment transport trucks, carrying what appeared to be ground-penetrating radar arrays and other technological systems I recognized from my military days as advanced surveying and containment equipment. I stepped onto my porch, coffee mug in hand, deliberately positioning myself as a property owner, greeting unexpected visitors rather than waiting inside for them to establish dominance over the situation. The calculated posture, casual but alert, cooperative but claiming territorial authority, was a negotiation tactic I'd learned during complex international infrastructure projects. The lead SUV stopped in the graveled area before my house, and a woman emerged wearing dark tactical pants and a windbreaker bearing no insignia, though her bearing immediately suggested military authority. Behind her, personnel from the other vehicles began establishing a perimeter with practiced efficiency, unloading equipment and establishing communication systems without waiting for formal permissions. "Mr. Henderson," the woman stated rather than asked as she approached the porch. "I'm Colonel Alexis Reynolds, Advanced Technology Recovery Division. I believe you spoke with Major Everett last night regarding the structural anomaly on your eastern pasture." I nodded, noting the specialized division name, not one I'd encountered during my Air Force career. "I expected a small assessment team, Colonel. This looks more like a full recovery operation." Reynolds' expression remained neutral, her short, grey-streaked hair and direct gaze projecting authority as she assessed both me and the situation. "May we speak inside? The morning air carries sound farther than is ideal for our discussion." Rather than waiting for a response, she moved toward the door with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. I stepped aside, recognizing the power dynamics at play, but unwilling to cede complete control of the interaction. Inside my kitchen, Reynolds declined my offer of coffee and moved directly to business. "Your discovery yesterday has activated certain protocols established for specific historical contingencies, Mr. Henderson. Based on your service record, I assume you understand the concept of compartmentalized information. 20 years in military. Engineering included plenty of need-to-know situations," I replied evenly. But finding an undocumented facility on property my family has owned since 1950 raises questions about transparency and jurisdiction." Reynolds nodded slightly, acknowledging my point without conceding to it. "The installation you've uncovered predates your family's ownership of this property. Mr. Henderson, the land transfer in 1950 included certain classified easements and access provisions that were deliberately omitted from public records." The implication stunned me momentarily. "You're saying the government maintained secret access, rights to my family's property for over 70 years without disclosure? That's not just classified operations, that's potentially illegal seizure." The legal framework was considerably different during the early Cold War period, Reynolds countered smoothly. National security priorities operated under executive authorities that wouldn't align with current transparency expectations. But that's a historical discussion for another time. She removed a tablet from her jacket and activated a secure interface. What matters now is properly assessing what you've discovered. Based on the partial exposure of the access hatch, we believe you've located Outpost Helix 7, a specialized research installation established in 1948 and officially decommissioned in 1974. Officially being the operative word? I asked, catching the careful terminology. Reynolds's slight smile acknowledged my perception. Your military background serves you well, Mr. Henderson. Yes, the official decommissioning doesn't necessarily reflect actual operational status. Some Cold War installations were maintained in various capacities beyond their public deactivation dates. Before I could press further, a sharp knock at the door interrupted us. A younger man in similar tactical clothing entered without waiting for permission. Colonel, preliminary perimeter established. Dr. Blackwood is requesting immediate authorization to deploy subsurface scanning equipment. Initial readings are unusual. Reynolds nodded. Tell him to proceed with full spectrum analysis but maintain containment protocols. No one approaches the exposed section without level 4 clearance verification. As the man departed, I set down my coffee mug with deliberate calm. You mentioned historical contingencies and specialized protocols. This rapid response and equipment deployment suggests you were prepared for this specific discovery. Almost as if you were waiting for it to happen. Reynolds studied me for a moment, apparently making calculations about information disclosure. Not waiting, Mr. Henderson, monitoring. Certain installations from that era contain technologies or research, materials that warrant ongoing surveillance, even in supposedly decommissioned status. And my property just happens to contain one of these installations. Nothing about your property's selection was coincidental, Reynolds replied. The ranch's isolated location, specific geological features, and proximity to certain electromagnetic anomalies made it ideal for Project Helix requirements. Your grandfather's military service and security profile made him an appropriate landowner for the surface property. The revelation landed like a physical blow. Are you saying my grandfather was aware of this? That my family was deliberately placed here as some kind of cover? Reynolds checked her watch. That's a complex question with implications beyond my immediate authorization to discuss. What I can tell you is that we need your cooperation for safe assessment of the installation, given your property rights and the unique circumstances of this exposure. The alternative would involve formal national security protocols that would be considerably less cooperative in nature. The thinly veiled threat wasn't lost on me, who recognized the negotiation for what it was, a careful balance between respecting my legal rights and exercising national security authority that could override them if necessary. I hadn't planned on returning to Montana after my military career. The structural engineering skills I'd developed during 15 years in the Air Force had opened lucrative private sector opportunities in urban development projects across the country. But when my father's health began failing 8 years ago, the pull of family obligation and the ranch's uncertain future brought me back to the place where 4 generations of Hendersons had carved out a living from the rocky soil and unpredictable climate of the Bitterroot Valley. As we crossed the eastern pasture toward the excavation site, my mind drifted to the complex path that had led me here. After graduating with honors in civil engineering from Montana State, I joined the Air Force with ambitions of designing cutting-edge facilities. My natural aptitude for structural analysis and problem-solving had quickly earned me assignments to specialized projects, hardened communications bunkers in South Korea, runway reinforcement systems in undisclosed Middle Eastern locations, and eventually advisory roles on classified infrastructure assessments that required presidential-level security clearance. "Your service record is impressive," Reynolds commented as we walked, breaking the tense silence. "Particularly your work on the Kabul subsurface stability assessment and the Incirlik reinforcement project. Both demonstrated unusual insight into detecting structural anomalies beneath seemingly solid foundations." My eyes narrowed slightly. "Those were classified operations. Neither appears in my public service record." Reynolds nodded without surprise. "Your background was thoroughly reviewed when the perimeter breach alert was triggered yesterday. Your expertise with military subsurface structures makes you uniquely qualified to understand what you've discovered, which creates both opportunity and complications for this operation." Ahead of us, the excavation site had been transformed. Overnight, a 30-meter security perimeter had been established with temporary barriers and monitoring equipment. Specialized sensors on tripods surrounded the exposed hatch, while technicians in tactical gear monitored readings from a mobile command center that hadn't been there 12 hours earlier. The comprehensive deployment suggested resources and readiness that went far beyond standard response protocols. "Looks like you've been preparing for this for some time," I observed. "Contingency planning is essential for certain historical assets," Reynolds replied without elaborating further. "My return to Whispering Pines Ranch had been challenging in ways my military deployments never were. The transition from highly structured military operations to the unpredictable rhythms of ranching had tested my adaptability. The property comprised nearly 800 acres of varying terrain, pasture land for our modest cattle operation, forested, sections on the eastern ridge where my grandfather had harvested timber, and the rocky northern section where generations of Hendersons had battled Montana's stubborn geology to expand our viable acreage. The ranch had been named by my grandmother, who claimed the distinctive sound of wind through the pine grove behind the main house carried whispers of the land's memories. I had dismissed the romantic notion when I was younger, but returning. As an adult, I'd found unexpected comfort in those natural sounds after years surrounded by the mechanical rhythms of military installations. My father's passing 3 years after my return had left me sole owner of a property rich in history, but struggling financially. Corporate agricultural interests had systematically acquired neighboring family ranches, their industrial operations and economies of scale making it increasingly difficult for independent ranchers to compete. Only my military pension and occasional consulting work for private infrastructure developers kept Whispering Pines financially viable. As we approached the excavation site, a man in his 60s wearing tactical pants and a button-down shirt beneath a lightweight jacket broke away from the technical team to intercept us. Despite his civilian appearance, I immediately recognized the subtle indicators of military background, the measured stride, balanced posture, and assessing gaze that remained ingrained long after formal service ended. "Mr. Henderson," the man extended his hand. "Dr. Hank Blackwood, Technical Assessment Director. Your discovery has created quite the interesting situation." I accepted the handshake, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact. "Seems like an awful lot of resources for assessing an abandoned Cold War bunker." Something resembling amusement flickered across Blackwood's weathered features. "I think we both know this isn't a standard missile silo or communications bunker, Mr. Henderson. The construction techniques visible just from the exposed section indicate technologies inconsistent with documented military architecture of the period." This assessment aligned with my own observations from the previous evening. The unusual sealing mechanisms and material composition had immediately struck me as anomalous compared to the standard hardened facilities I'd worked with throughout my career. Project Helix was never publicly acknowledged in declassified records, Blackwood continued, gesturing toward the exposed hatch. It operated under what we might call alternative oversight structures, research initiatives that existed outside conventional military chains of command. Black projects, I translated bluntly. Blackwood nodded. A colloquial but accurate description. The late 1940s through early 1960s represented a unique period in advanced research. Cold War imperatives combined with certain technological acquisitions created programs that operated with unusual autonomy and specialized funding channels. I studied the activity around the exposed hatch, recognizing specialized equipment being deployed with protocols I'd only encountered during the most sensitive operations of my military career. Those scanning systems aren't standard archaeological or structural assessment tools. You're looking for something specific. Perceptive observation, Blackwood acknowledged. Project Helix facilities were designed with certain unique material. Components that require specialized detection methods. Some elements don't register on conventional scanning systems. Before I could press for clarification, a technician approached with urgent information, speaking in the measured tones of someone communicating concerning data while maintaining professional composure. Sir, preliminary subsurface scanning confirms. An active power signature. Electromagnetic readings indicate operational systems approximately 40 feet below surface level. Blackwood exchanged a significant glance with Reynolds. Acknowledged. Implement Tier 2 assessment protocols, but maintain perimeter containment until verification of atmospheric integrity. The implication was clear. Whatever lay beneath my pasture wasn't a dormant historical relic, but something that had maintained functionality despite decades of supposed abandonment. More concerning was the mention of atmospheric integrity, suggesting potential containment of hazardous materials or environmental conditions. You mentioned my grandfather earlier, I said to Reynolds, connecting emerging pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known existed until yesterday. What was his actual relationship to this facility? Reynolds considered the question before responding. Your grandfather, Captain James Henderson, served with distinction in Korea. His technical background and security profile made him an ideal candidate for certain post-service arrangements. The specifics of those arrangements remain classified, but involved property acquisition with specific conditions. You're suggesting he knowingly purchased land with a secret government facility beneath it? I asked skeptically. I'm suggesting, Reynolds replied carefully, that the relationship between your family and what lies beneath this pasture may be more structured than coincidental. Understanding that relationship will become increasingly relevant as we proceed. With accessing the facility, as the morning progressed, the technical team established an increasingly sophisticated operation around the exposed hatch. Multiple scanning systems had been deployed in concentric rings, each apparently measuring different aspects of the underground structure. I noticed that several of the devices weren't broadcasting data to the central monitoring stations, but to secured systems with dedicated transmission equipment, suggesting compartmentalized analysis beyond even the specialized team on site. Your scanning patterns indicate you're expecting something beyond standard structural composition, I observed to Blackwood, who was reviewing data streams on a specialized tablet. The deployment looks more like what I saw in anomalous materials assessment than conventional structural integrity verification. Blackwood looked up with mild surprise. Your experience is showing, Mr. Henderson. Yes, Project Helix facilities incorporated certain unconventional materials that require specialized detection parameters. A technician approached with updated readings displayed on a ruggedized tablet. Sir, we're detecting the specific resonance patterns associated with Composition 7, Signature is consistent, but exhibits unusual degradation patterns in the outer containment layer. I caught the hesitation in Blackwood's response, a momentary calculation about information disclosure in my presence. Proceed with full spectrum analysis, focusing on interface boundaries, Blackwood instructed, and prepare the atmospheric sampling equipment for deployment once we've verified preliminary containment integrity. As the technician departed, I decided on a direct approach. Composition 7 isn't any standard building material I encountered in 15 years of military engineering work. No, it wouldn't be, Blackwood acknowledged. Certain advanced materials developed during this period never entered conventional construction vocabularies. Their applications were limited to highly specialized research environments. Before I could press further, Reynolds joined us, her conversation via secure communication device concluding as she approached. Headquarters has authorized Tier 1 access protocols based on preliminary readings. We're cleared to proceed with controlled entry assessment once atmospheric verification is complete. I studied the exposed section of the hatch more carefully, my engineering background identifying anomalies that had been partially obscured by decades of soil compression. The sealing mechanism doesn't match any standard military designs from the period. The interlocking system suggests concerns beyond conventional structural integrity, more like containment parameters for specialized environments. Again, your background proves valuable, Blackwood noted. Project Helix facilities were designed with environmental isolation as a primary consideration, not just keeping external factors out, but ensuring certain internal conditions remained contained. The careful terminology raised my professional concerns. Are we talking about biological, chemical, or radiological containment? Because any breach after 70 years of degradation creates significant safety considerations. Nothing so conventional, Reynolds interjected, but your caution is appropriate. The atmospheric sampling is precautionary rather than responsive to specific known hazards. As we spoke, the technical team had completed preparation of what appeared to be a specialized access system. A reinforced framework positioned above the exposed hatch with equipment that suggested remote operation capabilities rather than direct human intervention. "We're ready to attempt preliminary access, Dr. Blackwood," reported the team leader, a woman whose tactical gear included more specialized monitoring equipment than the other personnel. Blackwood nodded. "Proceed with remote protocol. Maintain negative pressure differential and implement continuous atmospheric monitoring." The sophisticated operation that followed demonstrated preparation far beyond standard procedures for accessing abandoned military installations. Remote manipulators were positioned over specific points on the hatch, guided by technicians referencing what appeared to be detailed schematics of the locking mechanism. "You have access procedures for a 70-year-old classified installation that was supposedly decommissioned half a century ago," I noted, watching the precise movements of the access team. That suggests continuous knowledge management rather than historical recovery. Reynolds didn't deny the observation. Certain installations retained monitoring protocols despite their official decommissioned status. Project Helix facilities in particular maintained specialized documentation requirements due to their unique research parameters. The remote manipulators engaged with precision, aligning with barely visible access points on the weathered surface. After several minutes of careful adjustment, a distinct mechanical sound emanated from beneath the soil, a series of clicks followed by the hiss of equalizing pressure that suggested an airtight environment had been maintained for decades. "Atmospheric. Seal integrity confirmed," reported a technician monitoring specialized equipment. "Initial readings show breathable oxygen levels at 19.3%, slightly below normal but within acceptable parameters." No detection of harmful biological or chemical agents. Temperature registering at 58 degrees Fahrenheit, consistent with deep subsurface environments. I watched as the massive hatch began to move, powered by what must have been internal mechanisms that had somehow maintained functionality despite decades of abandonment. The engineering implications alone were staggering. Power systems that remained operational after 70 years without maintenance defied conventional understanding of infrastructure longevity. As the hatch completed its opening sequence, powerful lights were positioned to illuminate what appeared to be a vertical access shaft extending deep below the surface. Metal rungs embedded in concrete walls descended into darkness, the construction showing remarkably little degradation for its age. "The preservation is impossible," I said, professional assessment overriding my caution about revealing knowledge. "These materials should show significant deterioration after decades underground, especially the metal components. The moisture levels in this soil alone should have caused substantial corrosion. That observation goes to the heart of why Project Helix remains classified," Blackwood replied. "The materials science developed within this program demonstrated preservation capabilities that remain beyond conventional understanding, even by current standards." Reynolds approached after conferring with the technical team. "Dr. Blackwood, initial shaft assessment is complete. We're detecting functional lighting systems activating sequentially as depths below the 30-foot mark. Environmental readings remain stable throughout the vertical passage." The implication stunned me momentarily. "You're saying the internal power systems are still operational? That's not just unusual. It's theoretically impossible with any energy technology from the 1940s. Theoretical impossibility was rather the point of Project Helix, Mr. Henderson," Blackwood said with unexpected candor. "The research conducted in these facilities focused on energy generation and material science applications that operated outside conventional scientific parameters of the period." Reynolds turned to me with unexpected directness. "Given your structural engineering background and personal connection to this property, Headquarters has authorized your limited participation in the initial assessment, should you choose to accept appropriate security provisions." The offer confirmed my growing suspicion that my discovery had triggered protocols established long before my tractor broke through the soil, contingencies that had anticipated not just the eventual exposure of the facility but my specific involvement in its assessment. "Before I agree to anything," I replied carefully, "I need to understand the actual nature of Project Helix and why my family's property was selected to hide it. What exactly was being researched here that requires this level of security 7 decades later?" Blackwood and Reynolds exchanged a glance that communicated complex professional calculations, assessing necessary disclosure against security protocols. Before either could respond, the distant sound of helicopter rotors drew our attention to the western sky, where 2 military transport helicopters approached the ranch. "It appears that question will be addressed by someone with higher authorization than mine," Reynolds said, checking her secure communication device. "Director Walters has expedited his arrival based on the preliminary readings." The name meant nothing to me, but the reaction among the technical personnel was immediate. A subtle heightening of attention and procedure that indicated someone of significant authority. Within minutes, the helicopters landed in the cleared area beyond the excavation site, and a small delegation disembarked with the coordinated efficiency that characterized high-level government operations. The central figure was immediately distinguishable. A tall man in his 60s, wearing a tailored suit that looked incongruous against the tactical equipment and Montana ranchland surrounding him. His silver hair and measured movements suggested someone accustomed to authority, while the deference shown by even senior personnel confirmed his position in whatever organizational hierarchy governed this operation. Director, Reynolds greeted him with formal respect. Preliminary access has been established with atmospheric integrity confirmed. Internal systems appear operational, including sequential lighting activation. Director Walters nodded acknowledgement, his attention quickly focusing on me. "Mr. Henderson," he said without introduction, extending his hand. "Your cooperation during this unusual circumstance is appreciated. I'm Director James Walters, Special Research Division." The deliberate vagueness of the divisional identification wasn't lost on me, as I had encountered similar, non-specific designations during classified operations. "Your response team seems extraordinarily well prepared for what should be a forgotten Cold War relic," I observed, accepting the handshake. Rather than dismissing the observation, Walters smiled slightly. "Directness suits this situation better than diplomatic evasion, Mr. Henderson. Walk with me, please." As we moved away from the immediate operational area, I noticed Walters's security detail maintaining precise distance. Close enough for protection, far enough for confidential conversation. "Your grandfather was a remarkable man," Walters began unexpectedly. His service record in both conventional military operations and certain specialized projects demonstrated exceptional adaptability and discretion, qualities that appear to have carried through generational lines. "You didn't know my grandfather," I countered, recognizing the psychological technique of establishing false familiarity. "Not personally, no," Walters acknowledged, "but I've reviewed his complete service record, including compartments that never entered public documentation. Captain James Henderson wasn't just selected randomly for property acquisition above a classified installation. He was specifically chosen because of his involvement in certain aspects of the project itself. This revelation landed with unexpected weight. I had grown up hearing my grandfather's carefully edited stories of military service, conventional accounts of Korean War operations that had never hinted at classified involvement. Project Helix wasn't a typical military research initiative. Walters continued as we walked. It operated outside conventional chains of command under what was then called majestic authorities, specialized research directives answering to executive oversight rather than military or scientific hierarchies. "I've never encountered that designation even in high-level clearance operations," I said. "You wouldn't have. The classification structure was permanently compartmentalized following congressional oversight reorganization in 1975. The knowledge was deliberately fragmented to prevent comprehensive understanding outside specific need-to-know parameters. We had reached a position overlooking the entire operational area, where the scope of the rapidly deployed resources became fully apparent. What had been an isolated ranch 24 hours earlier now resembled a sophisticated military operation, with specialized equipment and personnel establishing multiple security and assessment perimeters around the exposed entrance. "What you've discovered, Mr. Henderson, isn't merely a relic of Cold War research, but something considerably more significant to current national security interests," Walters said, studying the operation below. Project Helix facilities weren't investigating conventional weapon systems or telecommunications. They were researching fundamental aspects of energy generation and material science based on theoretical frameworks that departed significantly from mainstream scientific understanding. "You're talking about fringe science," I translated. "From contemporary perspective, yes," Walters acknowledged, "but the distinctions between fringe exploration and advanced research often blur during periods of intense competition and limited oversight. The early Cold War created unique conditions where theoretical possibilities received practical application regardless of their alignment with established scientific consensus. I processed this against my professional knowledge of military research. History. There were rumors among senior engineers about anomalous materials research during that period, alloys with impossible stress tolerances, energy systems with unexplained efficiency patterns. Most of us dismiss them as professional mythology. Professional mythologies often contain core elements of compartmentalized truth, Walters observed. Project Helix specifically focused on what internal documentation called non-conventional energy extraction methodologies, essentially approaches to generating power through means that operated outside established physics of the period. A technical specialist approached with evident urgency, addressing Walters directly. "Sir, internal scanning has completed preliminary mapping of the facility. It's considerably more extensive than indicated in historical documentation. We're detecting at least 3 additional levels below the primary research area." Walters received this information with controlled reaction, though I noticed a subtle tension that suggested the report contained unexpected elements. Composition analysis of the lower levels, consistent with specialized containment parameters, sir. The material density increases significantly below the secondary research level, with unusual radiation absorption properties that are limiting our scanning effectiveness. After the specialist departed, I addressed the implications directly. "Your historical documentation is incomplete, suggesting either deliberate information, compartmentalization, or unauthorized facility expansion. Neither scenario aligns with standard military research protocols." Walters studied me with newfound assessment. "Your analytical capabilities reflect your background, Mr. Henderson. Yes, the facility appears more extensive than official documentation indicated, which creates both investigative opportunities and security concerns. What exactly do you expect to find down there?" I asked. "Technology that's been superseded by 70 years of scientific advancement, preserved in what amounts to a time capsule. That assessment assumes conventional technological progression," Walters replied. "Project Helix research operated on theoretical frameworks that in some aspects remain beyond current scientific consensus. The energy generation methodologies they were investigating still represent what we might call alternative approaches to fundamental physics problems." Before I could press further, Reynolds approached with information that clearly warranted immediate attention. "Director, the automated systems have initiated an access verification protocol. The primary security gateway is requesting authentication that matches parameters we weren't anticipating." "Clarify," Walters instructed. "Sir, the system isn't responding to standard historical access codes. It's specifically requesting biometric verification keyed to authorized personnel bloodlines." All eyes turned to me, the implication becoming unmistakable. Whatever lay beneath my ranch wasn't just connected to my grandfather through property ownership, but through what appeared to be deliberately established biological authentication protocols. A security system designed to respond specifically to Henderson family genetics. "I believe," Walters said carefully, "that your questions about your grandfather's involvement may find answers below ground, Mr. Henderson. The security system appears to have been waiting for you specifically." The biometric verification system had been extracted from what appeared to be a recessed compartment near the base of the vertical access shaft. Unlike the weathered exterior hatch, this technology showed minimal aging, a sleek interface with scanning capabilities that appeared almost contemporary despite its presumed age. "This shouldn't exist," observed the chief technical specialist, examining the device. "The interface components incorporate materials and design elements that weren't commercially developed until the 1990s, yet construction dates place this installation in the late 1940s. I watched as the team carefully connected analysis equipment to the verification system, attempting to understand its parameters without triggering security protocols. The implications of a biometric system specifically requesting Henderson family genetics created unsettling questions about my grandfather's actual role in Project Helix. The authentication request is extremely specific, explained the specialist to Director Walters. It's not just seeking general genetic markers, but precise, familial patterns consistent with hereditary transmission through male lineage. The system appears designed to recognize descendants rather than just the original authorized personnel. Walters turned to me. This level of genetic authentication technology wasn't publicly acknowledged until decades after this facility was supposedly decommissioned. The presence of such advanced security measures suggests both extraordinary research significance and long-term operational planning that anticipated eventual access by future generations. You think my grandfather established this knowing someday I might need to access it? I asked skeptically. Not speculation, Mr. Henderson. Design intent, Reynolds interjected, reviewing data from the security analysis. The system architecture incorporates what appears to be deliberate generational authentication progression, essentially a security measure designed specifically to recognize descendants of original authorized personnel. Blackwood joined us, carrying what appeared to be historical documentation on a secured tablet. We've accessed portions of the compartmentalized personnel records for Project Helix. Captain James Henderson wasn't merely associated with the property acquisition. He was listed as Security Integration Specialist for multiple Helix installations. His expertise in advanced authentication systems appears throughout restricted documentation. That contradicts his official service record entirely, I said, struggling to reconcile this revelation with my family history. My grandfather's military documentation shows conventional engineering assignments throughout his career, nothing involving classified research. Dual-track service records were standard for personnel involved in Majestic-level projects, Walters explained. Official documentation maintained plausible career progressions, while actual assignments remained compartmentalized under separate record systems with executive-level access restrictions. The technical team had completed their preliminary analysis of the authentication system, approaching with findings that carried clear security implications. Sir, we can't bypass the biometric requirements without risking activation of what appear to be comprehensive countermeasure protocols. The system is specifically requesting genetic verification from the Henderson lineage. I found myself at a decision point that balanced professional caution against growing personal investment in understanding my family's hidden connection to this facility. What exactly would the verification process involve? I asked. Standard biometric sampling, essentially equivalent to civilian DNA testing procedures, explained the technical specialist. The system appears designed to extract and analyze genetic markers without invasive collection methods. Reynolds added context to the decision. This represents a controlled first step, Mr. Henderson. Authentication grants preliminary access to the facility's primary level but doesn't necessarily expose classified materials. It would allow our assessment team to evaluate structural integrity and containment status before determining appropriate next steps. After considering the implications, I made my decision. I'll provide the biometric verification, but I want complete transparency about what you discover regarding my grandfather's involvement. If my family has been living above a classified installation for 3 generations, I deserve to understand why. Walters nodded agreement. Within appropriate security parameters, yes, your cooperation warrants reciprocal information sharing about your family's connection to Project Helix. The verification process was surprisingly straightforward. The advanced system required only my palm, pressed against a scanner surface that emitted a brief pulse of light. Within seconds, the interface displayed confirmation in terminology that suggested military protocols from an earlier era. Henderson lineage confirmed, generational authorization active, primary access granted, remarkable preservation of Functionality, Blackwood commented, studying the system's response. Most biometric systems require regular calibration and maintenance, yet this has remained operational despite decades without apparent servicing. More significant than the technology's longevity was the implication of deliberate design for generational recognition. My grandfather had somehow incorporated genetic authentication that anticipated access by descendants not yet born when the facility was constructed, suggesting both extraordinary foresight and deep involvement in the facility's purpose. The main access portal began opening automatically after authentication, revealing a horizontal corridor extending from the base of the vertical shaft. Unlike the weathered exterior entrance, this interior section appeared remarkably preserved, polished concrete walls with recessed lighting that activated sequentially as the door opened, creating a path of illumination extending into the facility. Environmental readings remained stable, reported a technician monitoring atmospheric conditions. Oxygen levels normal, no detection of harmful contaminants, temperature consistent with controlled environment parameters rather than abandoned status. The specialized assessment team prepared to enter, deploying advanced scanning equipment to verify structural integrity and detect any potential hazards. Director Walters turned to me with unexpected candor. What we're about to access represents a historical technological divergence point, Mr. Henderson. Project Helix explored scientific approaches that mainstream research abandoned, not because they were proven invalid, but because alternative methodologies gained institutional momentum. You're suggesting they were pursuing viable technologies that simply lost the scientific popularity contest? I asked skeptically. I'm suggesting science progresses through both empirical advancement and institutional consensus, Walters clarified. During certain historical periods, research directions that challenged fundamental assumptions faced significant resistance regardless of their experimental validity. Project Helix operated outside those constraints. Reynolds approached with updated security assessments. Initial corridor appears clear, sir. No active security measures detected beyond the primary authentication system. The facility seems to have recognized Mr. Henderson's authorization as granting full primary level access. Proceed with standard assessment protocols, Walters instructed. Mr. Henderson will accompany the primary team given his authentication, status, and structural engineering background. As I prepared to enter the facility with the specialized team, Blackwood provided additional historical context that deepened the personal connection. According to these records, your grandfather wasn't just involved in the security aspects of Project Helix. He specifically requested assignment to this installation in 1949, approximately 1 year before he officially purchased the surface. Property. That contradicts everything I know about my family history, I said. The ranch purchase was always described as a fortunate opportunity after his military service, not a predetermined arrangement connected to classified research. Family histories often contain simplified narratives, Blackwood observed, particularly when the full truth involves classified elements that cannot be shared even with immediate family members. Your grandfather maintained operational security while establishing a legacy that would eventually complete a circle he helped design. I processed this revelation against memories of my grandfather, a practical man who emphasized responsibility and careful planning, whose occasional cryptic references to preparations for future uncertainties had seemed like typical greatest generation caution rather than specific knowledge of classified contingencies. As we prepared to enter the corridor, the technical specialist made a final observation that elevated the mystery further. Sir, internal systems appear to be initiating additional activation sequences in response to Mr. Henderson's authentication. The facility isn't just granting access, it's preparing for operation. The implication was clear. Whatever purpose this facility had been designed to serve, it had been waiting specifically for a Henderson descendant to return and reactivate. Systems that had remained dormant for decades, preserving capabilities that even now appeared to extend beyond conventional technological understanding. The assessment team moved carefully through the main corridor, specialized equipment cataloging every aspect of the remarkably preserved facility. I walked beside Reynolds and Blackwood, my engineering expertise allowing me to appreciate just how extraordinary the structural integrity remained after 7 decades. The preservation doesn't align with any standard construction methodology. From the period I noted examining the seamless junctions between wall panels, these materials should show degradation even in controlled environmental conditions. The complete absence of moisture damage alone defies conventional engineering expectations. Project Helix's Material Science Division developed composite technologies that never entered mainstream construction, Blackwood explained. The structural elements incorporate self-healing properties at the molecular level, essentially materials programmed to maintain integrity through internal reconfiguration processes. That sounds more like science fiction than 1940s engineering, I said. The line between advanced science and apparent fiction often depends on classification status, Walters replied from behind us. Certain research avenues yielded technological applications decades before similar concepts entered scientific literature. The corridor extended approximately 60 meters before opening into what appeared to be a central hub with multiple branching pathways. Unlike the utilitarian designs typical of military installations, this central chamber featured an almost artistic precision. Curved walls with recessed lighting that created an atmosphere more reminiscent of advanced research facilities from decades later. Structural design suggests priority for electromagnetic field stabilization rather than conventional load-bearing considerations, I observed, recognizing patterns in the architectural elements that contradicted standard engineering approaches. Before anyone could respond to my observation, the security communication channel activated with urgent information from the surface team. Director, we have a situation developing at the outer perimeter. Multiple vehicles approaching from the county access road. Initial identification suggests federal personnel, but verification protocols are showing inconsistencies. Walters moved immediately to a secured communication position, his expression hardening into operational focus. Clarify identification discrepancies. Sir, vehicles display Department of Energy markings and personnel are presenting credentials, but authorization codes don't match current protocols. They're claiming jurisdiction under historical technology recovery statutes. Reynolds and Blackwood exchanged concerned glances at this information. Historical technology recovery isn't a standard Department of Energy operational designation, Reynolds noted quietly to me. It suggests either compartmentalized operations outside normal channels or potential misrepresentation. Walters concluded, his communication with the security team, his demeanor shifting to controlled urgency. Mr. Henderson, our assessment timeline has been compressed by external developments. It appears news of your discovery has triggered interest from certain governmental elements operating through non-standard channels. Different agencies competing for jurisdiction? I asked, recognizing patterns from my military experience. More complex than standard interdepartmental competition, Walters replied. Project Helix generated knowledge with implications across multiple scientific and security domains. Over decades, various interests have maintained awareness of its potential significance through compartmentalized information channels. Your discovery has activated long-dormant contingency protocols within several organizational structures. As Walters coordinated a response to the perimeter situation, The assessment team had begun documenting the central hub area, uncovering control interfaces that defied technological expectations. What appeared to be computer terminals featured design elements decades ahead of their supposed construction era. These interfaces incorporate touchscreen technologies that weren't commercially developed until the 1980s, noted a specialist examining the systems. Yet power signatures indicate they're original to the facility's construction, not later additions. More concerning was the facility's response to our presence. Throughout the central hub, systems were activating without direct interaction. Lighting, adjusting to optimal levels, environmental controls, recalibrating air composition, and most significantly, data displays initializing with information that suggested the facility had maintained active monitoring functions despite its supposed abandoned status. It's not just responding to presence, Blackwood observed with growing concern. The system appears to be implementing specific activation protocols keyed to Mr. Henderson's authentication. This installation wasn't just preserved, it was waiting. I studied the activating displays, recognizing patterns in the data streams that contradicted the facility's presumed age. These readouts are showing external monitoring inputs with timestamps indicating continuous data collection throughout periods when this facility was supposedly decommissioned. Whatever this place was designed to do, it never stopped functioning. The security channel interrupted again with escalating concerns. Director, the Department of Energy personnel are insisting on immediate access under Executive Order 13526, Section 1.4. Their documentation appears authentic, but doesn't align with current operational protocols. They're specifically requesting access to Helix materials and research subjects. The reference to research subjects created visible tension among the senior personnel. Implement Tier 3 security protocols, Walters instructed. Verification. Through direct Pentagon authentication only. No access granted without personal authorization, regardless of presented credentials. As security procedures intensified above ground, the assessment of the central hub revealed additional complexities. Behind what initially appeared to be conventional wall panels, the team discovered sealed chambers with specialized containment. Systems unlike anything in standard military infrastructure. These aren't storage units, said the lead technical specialist, examining the sophisticated sealing mechanisms. They're preservation environments designed for biological or organic materials requiring precise atmospheric control. This discovery shifted the operational atmosphere immediately. What had been scientific curiosity became heightened security awareness, with specialized personnel deploying additional monitoring equipment focused on potential biological containment parameters. Project Helix wasn't just energy research, was it? I asked, recognizing the shift in protocols. The program encompassed multiple research avenues, Walters acknowledged carefully. Energy generation methodologies represented one aspect, but certain applications involved biological interface systems that required specialized containment considerations. Before I could press for clarification, Reynolds received urgent communication from the security team. Sir, we have additional complications. Satellite imaging has detected what appears to be unauthorized aerial surveillance approaching from the northeast. Characteristics suggest specialized equipment inconsistent with standard government operations. Non-governmental interests, Blackwood asked with evident concern. Assessment pending, but profile matches certain private sector research organizations with known interest in historical technology recovery, Reynolds replied. Specifically, entities associated with advanced propulsion and energy generation development. The convergence of multiple interested parties created an escalating security situation that transformed what had begun as historical assessment into active containment operations. Whatever lay within this facility clearly maintained significance. Beyond historical curiosity, technological applications, or research materials with continuing relevance to both governmental and private interests. My grandfather built our ranch house with direct line of sight to this location, I realized suddenly, memories of the property's layout taking on new significance. The Eastern Ridge observation point, where he claimed to watch for predators threatening the cattle. It maintains perfect visual oversight of this exact position. He was monitoring this facility for decades. This observation connected personal history to the unfolding situation, suggesting generations of Henderson family involvement beyond mere property ownership. The ranch's layout, the strategic positioning of outbuildings, even the maintained clearing patterns in surrounding woodland, all potentially elements of a long-term monitoring operation disguised as ordinary ranching activities. Your family wasn't just providing cover through property ownership, Blackwood confirmed, reviewing historical documentation on his secured tablet. They were maintaining active surveillance of the facility while presenting as ordinary ranchers. The operational design was brilliant in its simplicity, hiding extraordinary security protocols within seemingly mundane agricultural routines, as competing interests converged on the ranch above ground. The facility itself continued activating systems that had remained dormant for decades, each new function revealing technological capabilities that contradicted conventional historical understanding. Whatever Project Helix had been researching in the 1940s and 50s, its significance remained relevant enough in the present day to mobilize multiple organizations with extraordinary resources and specialized knowledge. Director, called a specialist. Examining the primary data interface, the system is displaying a message specifically addressed to Henderson Oversight Authority. It appears to be requesting confirmation for what it calls Phase 3 initialization. All eyes turned to me, the implication unmistakable. Whatever purpose this facility served, it had been designed with the expectation that a Henderson would eventually return to authorize its continued operation. A generational responsibility I had inherited without knowledge through my grandfather's carefully hidden second life. I studied the central hub's activation sequence with growing unease. My engineering background was sending warning signals about what we were witnessing. This wasn't just advanced technology from the 1940s. It was something that defied conventional technological progression entirely. The power distribution systems don't match any standard engineering approach, I said, examining junction points that revealed unfamiliar configurations. These aren't variants of conventional electrical systems. They're operating on fundamentally different principles. Blackwood nodded, seemingly appreciative of my analysis. Project Helix explored energy generation methodologies that operated outside standard electromagnetic paradigms. The theoretical framework came from a scientist named Victor Reichmann, whose work was acquired through Operation Paperclip, but subsequently diverged from mainstream physics research. As we moved deeper into the facility, the integration of my family history with this classified installation became increasingly apparent. At multiple security checkpoints, systems responded specifically to my presence, not just through the initial biometric verification, but through what appeared to be recognition parameters keyed to my movement patterns and even vocal characteristics. The system isn't just authenticating your identity, Reynolds observed, as we passed through yet another security gateway that opened without prompting. It's recognizing behavioral patterns consistent with Henderson genetic markers. Your grandfather implemented multi-factor identification protocols that included inherited physical characteristics. The implications were unsettling. My grandfather had somehow anticipated not just my genetic profile, but behavioral tendencies that would manifest generations later. This level of predictive biometric implementation went beyond classified 1940s research into something that challenged fundamental understanding of human identity parameters. We reached what appeared to be the primary research chamber, a circular space approximately 40 feet in diameter with a central platform surrounded by workstations. Unlike the previous areas, this section showed signs of suspended activity, research materials precisely arranged as if the scientists had expected to return momentarily despite the passing of decades. Initial assessment indicates this was the primary theoretical research hub, reported a specialist examining the workstations. The documentation appears to focus on what they termed non-local energy extraction, essentially methodologies for accessing energy sources that exist outside conventional space-time parameters. I approached one of the workstations where complex equations filled multiple connected displays. Despite my engineering background, the mathematical frameworks extended beyond standard physical models into theoretical constructs I couldn't fully comprehend. These formulations incorporate six-dimensional matrix calculations, I noted with professional confusion. That's not consistent with theoretical physics from the 1940s. Most of these concepts weren't even proposed until decades later. That observation goes to the heart of Project Helix's classified status, Walter said, joining me at the workstation. The research conducted here didn't just advance existing theoretical frameworks. It operated from fundamentally different first principles about the nature of energy and matter. As the technical team continued their assessment, I noticed a sealed chamber at the far end of the research hub. Unlike the other sections of the facility, this area featured additional security measures, including what appeared to be specialized electromagnetic shielding incorporated into the structural elements. "What's in there?" I asked, pointing toward the sealed chamber. Blackwood exchanged a glance with Walters before responding. According to historical documentation, that section contained what Project Helix termed the primary apparatus. Essentially, the experimental device designed to demonstrate their theoretical energy extraction principles. Before we could approach the chamber, urgent communication came through from the surface security team. "Director, we have escalating perimeter concerns. The Department of Energy personnel have been joined by additional federal assets, claiming oversight authority. They're presenting documentation signed by the Assistant Secretary for Strategic Technologies. Countermeasures Protocol Delta," Walters instructed without hesitation. "No acknowledgement of specific facility contents or research parameters until direct Pentagon verification of authorization codes." I recognized the tactical response: information compartmentalization to prevent unauthorized access through bureaucratic channels. The situation above ground was developing into a complex jurisdictional standoff with my property as the contested territory. "Your grandfather anticipated this scenario," Blackwood told me, as the team prepared specialized equipment for accessing the sealed chamber. The facility's design incorporates multiple redundant security systems specifically calibrated to resist interagency requisition attempts. The Henderson Oversight Authorization supersedes standard governmental jurisdiction precisely to prevent factional conflicts over research access. This revelation placed me in an unexpectedly central position within the unfolding situation. Whatever lay within this facility wasn't just connected to my family history. It was specifically designed to remain under Henderson family authority, despite competing governmental interests. "Are you saying my grandfather deliberately established independent oversight outside standard military chain of command?" I asked, struggling to reconcile this with my understanding of my family's military service traditions. Project Helix operated under what was called distributed authority protocols, Reynolds explained. Certain research initiatives during this period were deliberately fragmented across multiple oversight structures to prevent any single governmental entity from gaining complete control. Your grandfather's role established civilian counterbalance within that system. The technical team had completed preparation for accessing the sealed chamber, deploying specialized equipment to neutralize what appeared to be secondary security measures beyond the biological authentication I had already provided. "The chamber is requesting additional verification," reported the lead technician. "It's displaying what appears to be a personalized security question. Where does the wind carry memories?" The phrase struck me with unexpected familiarity. Words my grandmother had used when describing why she named our ranch. "Whispering pines," I responded without hesitation. "It's what my grandmother called the sound of wind through the pine grove behind our house." The security system accepted this input immediately, initiating the unsealing sequence for the inner chamber. The personalized nature of the verification confirmed the deliberate integration of my family history into the facility's security architecture. Layers of protection that went beyond standard classified protocols into deeply personal knowledge. As the chamber door began opening, revealing glimpses of sophisticated equipment within, Walters received another urgent update from the surface team. "Director, satellite detection indicates additional aerial assets converging on our location from multiple vectors. Signatures match advanced surveillance platforms consistent with specialized research organizations. Estimated arrival, 12 minutes. The time pressure intensified the assessment operations, with specialized teams deploying advanced documentation systems to record everything within the facility while maintaining security protocols. Whatever lay within the inner chamber had maintained sufficient significance to mobilize not just governmental assets, but private research interests with resources comparable to nation-state actors. "Your grandfather left something for you specifically," Blackwood said, directing my attention to what appeared to be a secured message system built into the primary research console. "This communication module is configured for direct Henderson access only. It may contain information critical to understanding both the facility's purpose and your family's connection to it." As I approached the console, the system activated in response to my proximity, displaying a message addressed to Henderson Inheritor, with a timestamp indicating it had been recorded just weeks before my grandfather's death decades earlier, an anticipatory communication from a man I had known only as a conventional military veteran and rancher, now revealed as something far more complex. The console screen illuminated with my grandfather's face, not the elderly man I remembered from childhood, but a much younger version in military uniform, recording this message decades before I would ever see it. The timestamp confirmed what seemed impossible. This message had been created nearly 50 years ago, yet addressed specifically to me as the future discoverer of this facility. "If you're seeing this message, then Project Helix's contingency timeline has been activated, and you've discovered what lies beneath Whispering Pines Ranch," my grandfather began, his expression solemn but determined. "I am Captain James Henderson, your grandfather, though I'm recording this message years before your birth. The fact that you're receiving it means several critical factors have aligned as predicted by the theoretical models established within this research program. I struggled to process the reality of watching my grandfather's message from beyond the grave, a deliberate communication prepared specifically for a future he wouldn't live to see, but had nonetheless anticipated with remarkable precision. Project Helix wasn't simply a government research initiative, he continued. It represented a response to certain discoveries made in the aftermath of World War II. Findings that challenged fundamental assumptions about energy, physics, and the nature of technological development. What we encountered wasn't just advanced science, Scott. It was something that required us to reconsider humanity's place in a much larger technological continuum. The use of my name in a recording created before my birth sent a chill through me. Behind me, I was vaguely aware of Walters and Blackwood exchanging significant glances as my grandfather's message continued. The central apparatus contained within. This facility isn't based on conventional human technological development. Its principles were derived from materials recovered near Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. Materials that demonstrated energy generation capabilities operating on principles entirely outside established scientific understanding. The revelation landed like a physical blow. My grandfather's calm delivery of information that contradicted official historical records transformed what had already been an extraordinary discovery into something with implications that extended far beyond classified Cold War research. Project Helix was established to reverse engineer these principles while maintaining strict compartmentalization to prevent broader awareness of their origin. The theoretical frameworks developed here generated multiple technological applications decades ahead of conventional scientific progression, including the self-healing structural materials, advanced power systems, and biological authentication. Technologies you've encountered throughout this facility. As my grandfather's message continued, technical specialists examining the central chamber had uncovered what appeared to be the primary apparatus he referenced, a device unlike anything in conventional engineering. Approximately 8 feet in diameter, its central component consisted of concentric rings surrounding what seemed to be a crystalline core with properties that defied standard material classification. The Henderson family was selected for oversight, authority precisely because of our particular genetic characteristics, my grandfather explained, the message shifting to more personal implications. Certain neurocognitive patterns in our family line demonstrated unusually strong resonance with the operational principles of the recovered technology. In simple terms, our specific genetic structure allows heightened intuitive interface capabilities with non-standard energy systems. This explained the biological authentication protocols we'd encountered, not just security measures, but operational necessity based on inherited neurological traits within the Henderson lineage. I was connected to this facility through more than just family history or property ownership. My genetic structure contained parameters specifically compatible with whatever technology lay at the heart of Project Helix. The research conducted here confirmed something extraordinary, my grandfather continued, his expression reflecting the weight of the information he was conveying. The technology we were studying wasn't just advanced, it represented principles of physics that human science wouldn't have independently discovered for centuries under conventional development patterns. The implications were too significant for any single governmental entity to control, which is why the Distributed Authority Protocol was established, with the Henderson family as the civilian counterbalance. The technical assessment of the central apparatus had progressed rapidly, with specialized equipment documenting every aspect of a device that shouldn't have existed within the technological capabilities of the 1940s or even the present day. Preliminary energy signature detection indicates the central core contains operational elements consistent with theoretical zero-point energy extraction, reported the lead technical specialist, her professional composure strained by what they were observing. If these readings are accurate, this technology represents energy generation capabilities that eliminate reliance on conventional fuel sources entirely. My grandfather's message continued, addressing specifically what was happening in the present moment. The facility is designed to activate certain operational sequences upon authentication by a Henderson inheritor. These protocols include controlled demonstration of the central apparatus's primary function, what we termed localized reality phase modulation in the original research documentation. As if responding to this statement, The apparatus began an activation sequence, the concentric rings beginning to rotate while the crystalline core emitted a soft blue luminescence that seemed to distort the surrounding space in subtle but measurable ways. "Director, we're detecting extraordinarily unusual energy patterns," reported a monitoring specialist with evident alarm. "The signature doesn't match any known profile in our classification system. It's generating what appears to be a spatially bounded field with properties that contradict standard physical laws." Walters moved immediately to establish containment protocols, but my grandfather's message suggested a different approach. "Scott, the activation sequence you're witnessing isn't dangerous. It's a controlled demonstration of principles your generation is only beginning to theoretically conceptualize. The apparatus creates what we termed a localized reality interface, essentially a field where the conventional boundaries between energy and matter become negotiable. Your presence, specifically, is the activation key because your neurological patterns provide the stabilization framework necessary for controlled operation." The revelation was extraordinary. Not just classified Cold War research, but actual recovered non-conventional technology with principles that remained beyond current scientific understanding. More personally significant was my direct biological connection to its operational parameters, a connection my grandfather had somehow anticipated decades before my birth. "The convergence of interests you're experiencing above ground was anticipated in our contingency planning," my grandfather continued, as if aware of the escalating security situation currently unfolding. "Multiple organizations have maintained awareness of Project Helix's potential across decades, each with differing agendas regarding its technological applications. Your inheritance isn't just this facility, Scott, but the responsibility for determining how these principles re-enter broader human understanding." The implication was clear. I wasn't simply an accidental discoverer, but the deliberately prepared inheritor of something with profound implications for humanity's technological future. Whatever lay at the heart of Project Helix represented scientific principles significant enough to warrant extraordinary security measures across multiple generations, culminating in this moment of revelation. The activation of the central apparatus had transformed the entire facility. Throughout the chamber, systems that had remained dormant for decades were initializing in coordinated sequence, responding to what appeared to be pre-programmed protocols triggered by my presence and the device's operation. "The energy field is stabilizing," reported the lead technical specialist, monitoring readings that defied conventional understanding. "It's establishing a contained parameter zone approximately 8 meters in diameter, centered on the apparatus." My grandfather's message continued, providing critical context for what was unfolding. "The demonstration you're witnessing represents only a fraction of the technology's actual capabilities. What Project Helix discovered wasn't just an advanced energy generation system, but a fundamentally different approach to manipulating physical reality itself, principles that could transform everything from energy production to materials science to medical applications. Above us, the situation had escalated to critical levels. Reynolds received urgent communication from the surface security team. "Director, we have multiple organizations establishing positions around the property perimeter. Department of Energy. Personnel have been joined by representatives from DARPA, Advanced Research Systems Division, and at least 2 private aerospace research corporations. All are presenting various authorization credentials demanding immediate access." Walters made a decisive assessment. Implementation of Omega Containment Protocol. No external access authorized, regardless of presented credentials. Accelerate documentation and preservation procedures with priority on the central apparatus. The coordinated response suggested rehearsed contingency implementation, procedures established long ago for exactly this scenario. Throughout the facility, specialized teams deployed advanced documentation systems, creating comprehensive digital records of every aspect of the technology and research materials. Scott, my grandfather's recorded message, addressed me directly. The decision you're facing now was anticipated in our planning. The technology within this facility represents power beyond conventional understanding. Power that various interests will seek to control for their own purposes. The Henderson Oversight Authority was established specifically to prevent unilateral acquisition by any single entity, governmental or private. The implication was clear. I now held decision authority that superseded even Director Walter's considerable governmental influence. This wasn't just about historical discovery, but active determination of how this technology would re-enter broader awareness after decades of containment. Director, I said, turning to Walters with newfound clarity, my grandfather established specific protocols for this situation, didn't he? Procedures that give the Henderson inheritor final determination authority? Walters nodded, his expression reflecting professional respect. Your assessment is correct. Project Helix's organizational structure established what was termed civilian counterbalance authority, essentially veto power over governmental acquisition decisions, specifically vested in the Henderson family lineage. The competing organizations above ground, they're all aware of this authority structure. They are, Reynolds confirmed, which explains the accelerated convergence once your authentication activated the facility's systems. Each entity is attempting to establish preferential position before you exercise your authorized decision protocols. The central apparatus had stabilized into operational mode, generating an energy field with properties that defied conventional scientific understanding. Within this field, the normal laws of physics appeared selectively modified, objects exhibiting altered mass properties, light bending in patterns that suggested space-time distortion, and energy signatures that indicated massive power generation without apparent fuel source. The technology demonstrates principles that make conventional energy generation obsolete, Blackwood observed, studying the apparatus with professional awe. But the applications extend far beyond just power systems. The selective manipulation of physical constants within a controlled field has implications for everything from materials science to medical applications to transportation systems. My grandfather's message reached its conclusion with direct guidance for my current situation. Scott, the Distributed Authority Protocol requires active Henderson participation to authorize any removal or application of this technology. Without your explicit consent, no organization, governmental or private, can legally acquire or implement these systems. This protection was established specifically to prevent unilateral control of principles that should benefit humanity broadly rather than serve narrow interests. The message ended with a personal statement that connected family history to the extraordinary responsibility I now faced. The name Whispering Pines wasn't just your grandmother's poetic description. It was an operational reference to the sound, generated by specialized monitoring equipment, disguised within the pine grove, equipment that has maintained surveillance of this facility for generations. Our family hasn't just been ranching this land. We've been its guardians until the appropriate moment for reintroduction of these principles. That moment, it appears, has arrived during your lifetime. I trust your judgment, grandson. I'll never meet to handle this inheritance with the wisdom its significance demands. As the recording ended, I found myself at the center of a momentous decision point, one with implications extending far beyond my quiet Montana ranch into potential technological transformation that would affect humanity's future development. Director. Walters, I said with newfound resolve, I believe we need to implement a controlled demonstration protocol for the representatives above ground. Not full access, but enough to establish the verified existence of these principles under conditions that prevent unilateral acquisition. Walters considered my proposal carefully before nodding agreement. A calibrated demonstration under Henderson. Oversight would establish verified parameters while maintaining the distributed authority structure. It's consistent with the original Project Helix protocols for eventual technological reintegration. Over the next hour, we implemented a carefully structured response to the competing interests above ground. Rather than denying access entirely or surrendering control to any single organization, I authorized a controlled demonstration of the central apparatus's basic principles, enough to confirm the extraordinary technology without revealing its full capabilities or operational mechanics. Representatives from each organization were permitted limited access to the facility under strict security protocols, allowed to observe specific energy generation demonstrations while comprehensive. Monitoring ensured no unauthorized documentation or sampling occurred. The revelation of technology that defied conventional scientific understanding created a momentary unity among normally competing interests, shared amazement transcending institutional rivalries. As I observed these senior officials and scientists witnessing principles that contradicted established physics, I reflected on the extraordinary responsibility my grandfather had embedded in our family legacy. The Henderson Oversight Authority wasn't just about protecting classified technology, it was about ensuring that principles with the potential to transform humanity's relationship with energy and physical reality wouldn't be monopolized by any single entity. They'll all be submitting acquisition proposals within hours, Reynolds noted, as the demonstration concluded and the representatives were escorted back to the surface. Each organization will present compelling arguments for why they should receive preferential access rights, which is precisely why the Distributed Authority Protocol was established, Blackwood added. Your grandfather and the other Project Helix founders recognized that technology of this significance required oversight beyond conventional governmental or corporate structures. Through the specialized monitoring systems, I observed the gradual departure of the various organizational representatives from my property, not in defeat, but in strategic retreat, to develop more comprehensive acquisition approaches. What had begun as potential confrontation had transformed into calculated competition for authorized access under Henderson oversight parameters. That evening, as temporary security measures were established around the facility and specialized preservation systems deployed to maintain its integrity, I returned briefly to my farmhouse. The modest ranch home I'd known my entire life now existed in a different context, not just a struggling agricultural operation, but the surface component of a multi-generational guardianship more significant than I could have imagined. On my kitchen table lay the old wooden box my grandfather had left me upon his death, a container I'd assumed held only personal mementos, but now recognized might contain additional information related to my newly discovered responsibility. Inside, beneath family photographs and military commendations, I found a sealed envelope with instructions to be opened when the wind's whispers revealed their meaning. The cryptic guidance suddenly made sense in light of what I'd discovered. My quiet Montana ranch hadn't just been a family homestead, but the carefully maintained guardian property for something that might fundamentally alter humanity's technological future, a responsibility that had passed to me through generations. without my knowledge, until a routine drainage project had quite literally broken through the surface of a much deeper reality. I opened the envelope with careful deliberation, somehow knowing that whatever my grandfather had left within would provide essential guidance for the unprecedented situation I now faced. Inside was a handwritten letter, the penmanship steady and deliberate, dated just weeks before his death. "My dear Scott," it began, addressing me directly, though I'd been just a child when he passed. "If you're reading this, then the contingency we anticipated has occurred. You've discovered what lies beneath Whispering Pines, and with it, a responsibility few have ever been asked to bear." The letter continued with insights that transcended the technical aspects of Project Helix, addressing instead the profound philosophical implications of revolutionary technology's reintegration into human development. What you've uncovered isn't just advanced science, but a fundamental choice point for humanity. The principles demonstrated within that facility represent capabilities that could eliminate energy scarcity, transform environmental limitations, and fundamentally alter humanity's relationship with physical reality itself. Such power cannot belong to any single government, corporation, or individual, including us. His wisdom resonated with my own instinctive understanding of the situation. The competing interests converging on my property weren't simply seeking classified historical technology, but principles that could reshape global power structures and developmental trajectories. The Henderson Oversight Authority wasn't established to control this technology, Scott, but to ensure it serves broader human advancement rather than narrow interests. Our family wasn't chosen because we're special, but because we're ordinary. Montana ranchers whose connection to the land and community represents values that should guide technological implementation. As darkness settled over Whispering Pines Ranch, I stood on my porch looking out over the property that had been in my family for generations. The silhouettes of security personnel were barely visible in the distance, maintaining protective positions around what had become perhaps the most valuable technological discovery of the century. Yet beneath my feet lay not just revolutionary technology, but a profound responsibility to ensure its principles benefited humanity broadly, rather than serving concentrated power. My grandfather's letter concluded with guidance that would shape my approach to the extraordinary inheritance I'd received. Technology without wisdom becomes merely sophisticated destruction. Power without compassion becomes merely efficient oppression. The true inheritance I've left you isn't the facility or its contents, but the opportunity to demonstrate that humanity's technological advancement and ethical development can progress together rather than in opposition. The quiet Montana night, with stars spreading across the vast sky above my isolated ranch, provided perspective on the profound decision point I now faced. My tractor's accidental breach of that buried hatch hadn't just uncovered classified cold war research, but had initiated a carefully designed intergenerational transfer of responsibility for principles that might fundamentally transform humanity's future. Principles that had been waiting patiently beneath my family's ranch for precisely the moment when they might re-enter human awareness under guidance that prioritized wisdom alongside advancement. What had begun as an ordinary morning on a struggling cattle ranch had evolved into something I could never have anticipated. The moment when my family's hidden legacy converged with humanity's technological future, with me standing at the precise point where those trajectories intersected. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.